Hey all, Late Night here. Bungie's put out the full patch notes for update 2.4.0 that went out today, so we'll be going over it. There is quite a bit to cover, so I'll be putting down in the video notes the different times of when I talk about different features, so if you're interested in a certain section, you can jump straight to it and get that information right away. As always, if you like this video and you want more Destiny content, keep it tuned here with a like and a subscribe down below. Alright, starting off, there were several weapon rebalances and bug fixes that went into this patch, so we'll go over those first. Leading off, we've got the auto rifles. First change was they reduced the maximum magazine size for the highest rate of fire auto rifle family. Now that's the Doctrine of Passing and other rifles like it. This means when you're using that family of auto rifle, you're going to need to plan your encounters more efficiently and have those breaks where you can reload without getting overwhelmed. The second change they put into auto rifles is that the middle rate of fire auto rifles have their damage increased by 1.5%. That increase shouldn't make a huge difference to the time to kill, but it'll hopefully give those mid-range auto rifles a little bit more love and a little bit more usage. Next up, we've got the pulse rifles. Now it sounds like the high rate of fire pulse rifles are already getting enough love, so they left them alone. They focused a bit more on the mid and low rate of fire models. First change is real specific. They increased the rate of fire on the Haka pulse rifle, I'm going to butcher this name, the Ludmilla D. Now that specific pulse rifle is actually a really low rate of fire pulse rifle, so it sounds like instead of upping the base damage value, they increased the rate of fire a little bit to give it some more punch. Second change was they give a 2% damage increase to the middle rate of fire pulse rifle family. That's stuff like the Nerwin's Mercy. Now I already love my Nerwin's Mercy. I use it all the time, so a little bit more damage, that's going to be good news. Now on to hand cannons. The two major changes are just specific bug fixes to specific weapons, so we'll just burn through these real quick. First up, they fixed an issue with Zauli's Bane. That's the raid hand cannon, where the rate of fire stat displayed incorrectly. Next up, they fixed an issue with Vanguard and Arms Day hand cannons. That's the Down and Doubt 00-0 and the Kumatok HC4, where the stats displayed incorrectly. So it doesn't sound like too much actually changed as far as functionality with hand cannons, just displaying of stats that were showing up incorrectly previously. And for the sake of completeness, scout rifles. They weren't mentioned in the patch notes. I don't think they're getting any changes, but I thought I'd mention them so we don't think we're leaving them out. Moving on to special weapons, we'll start with the shotgun. High rate of fire shotguns weren't really getting too much use, so they decided to sweeten it up a little bit and made some changes. First up, specifically to the Amobius, that's the Titan class shotgun, they decreased the spread slightly and they increased the base stability by 60%. I think it's nice they're giving that class-specific weapon a little bit of love because it's always felt a little underwhelming and I want it to be a bit more special, so hopefully this helps it out. Next up, they reduced the spread angle penalty on shotguns that have the perk full auto. Now this excludes the invective. Now this means if you've got a full auto shotgun, it's not going to be dumping rounds quite as far all over the place when you're just holding down the trigger. Really makes it a little bit more viable. And finally, as it's written here, it says increased high rate of fire and middle low rate of fire shotgun damages by 2%. Now the wording's a little bit confusing, but I'm guessing that means they increase the damage by 2% of the high rate of fire shotguns and the middle low rate of fire shotguns, and they left the middle rate of fire shotguns alone entirely. Now maybe I'm reading that wrong, but I take it that those two families of shotguns needed a little bit of love, but the middle rate of fire was already in a good spot, so they left those alone. I'm really not too much of a shotgun user, so it's hard to pass judgment on this, but it sounds like it'll be pretty interesting to see how those full auto shotguns start performing out there in the Crucible. Alright, now on to sniper rifles. There's been quite a bit of commotion online about this, and there's a bunch of changes, so let's go over all of them. First change, reduce damage on middle-high impact sniper rifles by 6.95%. Now for clarification, mid-high impact sniper rifles is the 1,000-yard stare family of sniper rifles. This means this family of sniper rifles can no longer get a single headshot kill on a Guardian that's using their super if they're spec'd for high armor. Makes a pretty big difference in those Crucible matches, especially those competitive game types. Also, this doesn't affect the No Land Beyond, as that's an exotic and has its own separate balancing. Next big change is they reduced the target acquisition on the LDR 5001 and the Y09 Longbow Synthesis to bring it more in line with other snipers in that class. I'm guessing they looked at the data, they saw the target acquisition and the kills on those two rifles were a little bit high, and so they brought them back in line with what they should be. Next up, they increase the starting strength for aim deflection, aka the amount of flinch you have when you take damage while scoped in, from 30% to 50%. Furthermore, with every subsequent hit, the strength of the deflection increases until you hit 100% max deflection. Now put into simple terms, that means if you're looking down the scope of a sniper, if you take a hit, you're going to flinch more than you used to, and as you take more consecutive hits, you'll flinch even more. So as a quick example to illustrate this change, if you're trying to scope in and snipe somebody, but somebody's clipping you with their auto rifle, even if they're not killing you, they are making it nigh impossible for you to accurately snipe somebody. Next up, also having to do with flinch, the overall sniper ADS aim deflection multiplier was increased from 1.85 to 1.9. Not a huge change, but basically it means that when you're looking down your scope, you'll flinch even more when you're taking damage. And lastly, they fixed an issue where the Irene UR stat bar shows an incorrect rate of fire. So no change, just a display thing. Okay, so that's a lot of sniper rifle changes. Let's boil it down just a little bit. Those damage changes mean the mid-high impact snipers won't dominate quite as much on the battlefield. A skilled hand will still be able to pick people off really well, but those double tap body shot kills won't happen quite as often. As for the flinch, it means that primary weapons will have a better chance against sniper rifles. If you're dueling against somebody with your scout rifle, your auto rifle, and you're hitting them consistently, it's going to be quite a bit harder for them to line up that headshot and finish you off before you finish whittling them down. Next up, we've got sidearms. Now, there's quite a few changes going on with these. There hasn't been a lot of buzz about it yet, but personally I think this could make a pretty big difference. First up, they unified the damage for all sidearm types, increased the damage for the existing Haka sidearm families by 3% for the low rate of fire and 7% for the high rate of fire. Then they decreased the damage for non-hit scan sidearms by 5%, like the Vestian Dynasty and the Queen's Choice. Basically, it means they're bringing all the sidearms damages into line with each other, kind of normalizing them as a weapon family. Next, there was a minor extension for the damage fall-off point of sidearms across the board, and a minor increase of stability for all sidearms also across the board. Translated, this means your sidearm will fire slightly farther before the damage starts to fall off, and it'll be more stable. Next up, there's an added damage bonus in PvE that's 20 to 30% depending on the combatant tier you're facing. That is 20 to 30% more damage against minions of darkness from your sidearm. That definitely makes them a much more viable weapon. And last, to accommodate two new faster firing sidearm families releasing in Rise of Iron, all current sidearm rate of fire bars will be slightly shorter. Now this is going to allow for more bar space to display rate of fire differentiation, and it doesn't change the actual rate of fire, just the way it's displayed in the stats. Now what gets me is it says that there are two new faster firing sidearm families that are coming out in Rise of Iron. Now how do you get faster than the current sidearms? I'm thinking we're going to get burst fire or even full auto sidearms. That's going to be amazing. Next, we've got fusion rifles. These are just display bug fixes. Accelerated coils correctly reflects damage reduction on the UI stat bars. There's no gameplay effect, just changes how it displays on those bars. And they fixed an issue where the stat bars on the Tetuan Rage displayed incorrectly. Now on to rocket launchers. The changes here only had to do with two specific perks, grenades and horseshoes and cluster bombs. Right now, cluster bombs are underperforming, so they extended the damage fall-off distance for the cluster bomb perk explosions. Right now, we've got those situations where you fire a cluster bomb rocket at somebody, explosions go off all around their feet, but you only see like single digits coming off of them worth of damage. This is happening because those targets are slightly outside the effective range for those cluster bombs. Now with this change, hopefully that'll happen quite a bit less. And next, they're reducing the proc radius on grenades and horseshoes from 1.3 meters to 1 meter. That means in order for that proximity detonation to trigger on these rockets when you're shooting them at somebody, you've got to be that much closer to actually hitting them. Also keep in mind that truth is not affected because it's an exotic with its own separate balancing. And finally, onto machine guns, only a small change here. Increase the damage on the highest rate of fire machine guns by 4%. I don't know about you, but that means I'm going to dust off my Diluvian and see if it's actually worth something now. Alright, so that was a lot of weapons changes. Some more than others, like the sniper rifle, but I'm excited to see how that plays out both in Crucible and on the PvE side. Could be an interesting sandbox change. Moving on, they made a couple changes to several of the weapons perks. I'm going to burn through those real quickly. The general perks. Magazine perks now give range bonuses. They removed the impact stat bonuses that had no effect on base damage and only on the UI bars. Armor-piercing rounds adds +4 range and -4 handling. High-caliber rounds adds +3 range, -5 handling. Skip rounds adds +5 range, -3 handling, and +5 to your inventory. So where those perks used to have a single effect on a single stat, it sounds like they have multiple effects on 2 or more stats now. Next up, Take a Knee. It now activates after 0.5 seconds of crouching and adds a flinch reduction of 25% and an increased aim down sight speed by 25%. So it sounds like crouching with this perk is going to make it so you flinch less and you aim down sights faster, but at the cost of reduced mobility while you're crouching. Next up, Exhumed added an extra 5 seconds of effect time for 15 seconds total. Next, Cascade. Melee kills automatically reload a portion of your magazine. Surplus now increases the ammo carried capacity. Grave Robber increases the proc chance from 20% to 25%. Guerrilla Fighter increases stability and range bonuses by 200%. Unflinching decreased the efficacy of the perk from 25% flinch reduction to 15% flinch reduction, and Firefly, a possible fix for crash-related special effects triggered by the Firefly perk. So a bunch of little tweaks there, either changing how effective they are or exactly how they work. Interesting to see how that changes the desired perk configuration for the various weapons. Next up, there were a bunch of tweaks to several of the exotic weapons. First up, we saw this coming, the Universal Remote. The exotic perk range bonus was reduced by 75%, so it no longer guarantees maximum shotgun range, and it increased the rate of fire, which, as a secondary effect, decreased its space damage. So, in the last month or more, we've seen in the Crucible a bunch of people running around with this heavy Defender, Shotgun, Universal Remote build. It sounds like we're not going to see that quite as much anymore. Next up, the Fabian strategy. That's the Titan-specific auto rifle. Kills with this weapon now automatically load a portion of the magazine, increased base range by 16%, and increased base stability by 44%. While those numbers sound pretty nice, I'd have to try it out to see if it's actually a viable weapon now. The Thorn reduced base range by 25%. With the confirmation that the Thorn is returning in Year 3 at max light levels, there's been a lot of skepticism about whether this is going to be a good idea. It sounds like Bungie is addressing that early on before it even happens. Next, the Dreg's Promise. Increased base damage by 8%, increased magazine size by 3. Since this is a burst fire weapon, I think that gives us one more burst with increased damage. Plus, this is a further buff to the weapon after they increased the tracking of its rounds a few patches ago. Next, we've got the Touch of Malice. The Touch of Malice's self-damage infliction now removes Blessing of Light. Using Blessing of Light had become a popular strategy to negate the self-damage the Touch of Malice does, but it sounds like that combination was a little too powerful and is being removed as an option. Additionally, this had become a critical strategy for a lot of teams clearing Oryx hard mode, requiring Blessing of Light paired with Touch of Malice to take down the light-eating ogres during the Oryx fight. Hopefully this isn't going to become an issue clearing that part of the raid as we continue to gain light and become over-leveled for that activity. Next up, the exotic pulse rifle No Time to Explain has gained the intrinsic perk Headseeker, and the exotic scout rifle Boolean Gemini will gain the intrinsic perk High Caliber Rounds. So those are the changes coming to these exotic weapons in Update 2.4.0. A few of them are a little bit surprising, but some of them not so much. We'll see how this works out with the balance. Next up, two small changes were made to armor. The first is a functionality bug where sometimes +1 armor perks weren't correctly applied. This has been fixed. And the second is that class items can now accept shaders. Again. This has been teased previously by some of the designers' tweets, but now it's been confirmed and it's in the patches, so get out there and look fabulous with those shaders on your class items. Especially you hunters. Next up, rewards for completing public events have been changed, which, in my opinion, makes them worth doing again. For the first daily public gold event completion, you will gain 1 legendary engram, 15 destination materials, 15 legendary marks, 5 motes of light, a low chance for an exotic shard, 4,000 XP, and 25 Vanguard rep. Definitely a step up from what we're getting right now for doing those things. Furthermore, for repeated gold public events, you will get on each subsequent completion 200 Glimmer, a chance for 2 to 5 destination materials, a chance for 1 to 2 motes of light, 1.5 thousand XP, a green or a blue engram, and 25 Vanguard rep. And there are also rewards if you don't manage to get repeated golds. Repeated silver public event completions will give you 100 Glimmer and a chance for 2 to 3 destination materials as well as 750 XP. And repeated bronze completions will give you 50 Glimmer, a chance for 1 to 2 destination materials, and 500 XP. So all around, it gives you something to be excited for when the sky goes dark and something's going down. Jump in, help some Guardians out, and get some decent rewards. Next up, the quest menu and UI has been changed up just a little bit. The quest menu has been renamed to Progress. Record books, which we know are going to be more important in Rise of Iron, have been moved from the materials in the inventory over to their own location in the new Progress menu, and quest, bounty, and reputation displays have been slightly adjusted. Next up, we got a bunch of Crucible changes. Here we go. Legendary engrams have been removed from the Crucible post-game Carnage report, so Crucible legendary weapons will drop significantly more often. Anybody who's been out there grinding Crucible in hopes of getting a nice Ice Luna drop, you're going to be appreciative of that. They fixed an issue where Crucible activity tooltips were showing the wrong icon. That's pretty self-explanatory. Beowulf, Cicero, and Gilgamesh shaders can once again be acquired by completing Crucible matches. Those are Year 1 shaders that were temporarily removed from the loot table, so now you can get them again, it sounds like. Fixed some reward logic associated with vanity items from the Shack's weekly packages. That's pretty non-specific, but hopefully that means that rewards are dropping correctly now. In the Crucible Quest Factions, New Monarchy will no longer ask the player to earn points in the salvage playlist. Wish they'd done that sooner, because really, I don't like salvage and it was a pain to get through that. The Crucible Quartermaster weekly bounties have been removed. Truthfully, not sure why they were there in the first place, because they didn't give you credit towards Shax's weekly True Meaning of War bounty. Finally, the free sterling treasure from Weekly Crucible and Postmaster will be discontinued, but will still be available from the Prison of Elders and Eververse. This makes sense because I'm sure it's clearing the way for the new Radiant treasures that will be coming with Rise of Iron. As for Crucible game types, there are a few different tweaks. 3v3 game types will give slightly less heavy ammo per brick to account for the reduced number of players. Trials of Osiris for Year 2 has ended. Trials of Osiris will return in Rise of Iron on September 30th. The Elimination game type has received the following changes. Heavy ammo will only spawn now at a single central location, causing all players to fight for it instead of each team having their own box. And they've resolved an issue where heavy ammo could persist through multiple rounds if the heavy ammo round ended before the spawn occurred. They've also made several of the following changes to the Salvage game type. Reduced initial relic capture spawn delay from 15 seconds to 10 seconds. Reduced time between relic spawns from 25 seconds to 15 seconds. Reduced countdown time on enemy probe from 45 seconds to 30 seconds. Increased interaction radius on the enemy probe from 3 meters to 5 meters. Increased successful sabotage score from 150 to 200 points. And changed scoring so that now only the interacting player gets points for a successful sabotage. Like I said before, salvage really wasn't a game type I very much liked because it always seemed very lopsided or unbalanced. Hopefully these will really make it a competitive game type again. And finally, the following changes have been made in Rift. Added an overshield on player spawn to cut down on spawn camping, and extended runner damage resistance when picking up Spark by a few seconds. Rift has always been a fun but frustrating game type. Hopefully this keeps the fun but reduces some of the frustration. They've also made a few tweaks to the following maps in Crucible. In Rusted Lands, Vertigo, and Crossroads, they've added invisible physics to stop players from escaping the intended play area. That'll be nice, keeping players on the map and no more sky sniping. In Pantheon, they rotated lower heavy ammo crate to keep the ammo from falling off the map. I had to chuckle when I read this one. It's happened to me more than a few times. And in Blindwatch, they've moved the elimination tiebreaker zone indoors to avoid the bias towards Bravo. I don't play a whole lot of elimination, but I've definitely experienced that tiebreaker zone being in a weird spot, so I'm glad they've cleaned that up. And finally, there have been the following small UI changes. Fireteam and players in current game session lists have been combined and will display 12 players without needing to change pages. Clan roster has been added, but it will not be immediately available. The inventory menu has been modified to add ornaments, and the Abandoned Quest kiosk menu pagination now allows users to view more than just the first page. Well, that was quite a few changes, and as Bungie said, that's getting us ready for Rise of Iron in less than 2 weeks. Thanks for sticking it out. I know that was quite a bit of content to cover. I really appreciate your watching. Keep it tuned here for more Rise of Iron and Destiny news in the coming weeks, and I will catch you next time.